I heard my father whisper to my stepmother, his voice sharp and cold. "She will not be around much longer. Once she is out, we will sell the house." Those words struck me like a blade to the chest. I froze in the hallway, the dim light from the living room stretching their shadows across the wall, and for a moment I could not tell which hurt more, the betrayal itself or the calm way he said it. He was not angry. He was not desperate. He was simply certain. "Elaine," my stepmother leaned closer to him and murmured with a smile, "and when she is gone, no one will question us." My body turned to stone. Gone. The word echoed in my head. They did not mean leaving for a new apartment. They meant gone as in erased, gone as in dead. I pressed my hand against the pendant my late mother had given me, the only piece of her I carried every day, and tried not to shake. My father Robert once held me on his lap when I cried after school, once read me bedtime stories. Now the same man was plotting my disappearance. The house we were standing in was not just wood and brick. It was the last gift from my mother Clara, who had died when I was 17. Every corner carried her presence. The piano she used to play the roses she planted by the window, the kitchen where she would hum while cooking. That house was love carved into walls. And they were planning to steal it by destroying me. The whispers carried on. Robert's tone was practical, like discussing a business deal. "The realtor said 750, maybe more if we list quickly." Elaine laughed softly, her bracelets clinking. "With her out of the picture, we can finally live free." My stomach twisted. I could not breathe. The betrayal was heavy enough to choke me, but beneath it something darker began to take shape. If I confronted them now, if I burst into the room, what would they do? Would they act sooner? Would they poison me at breakfast? I backed away slowly, careful not to let the floorboards creak. My heart pounded so loud I was certain they would hear it. In my room, I closed the door without a sound and leaned against it, my whole body trembling. The word "gone" rang in my ears over and over. I remembered the night of my mother's funeral when Robert left me alone and disappeared into a bar. I remembered the first time Elaine sat at my mother's seat at the table, her perfume replacing the scent of roses that once lingered in the dining room. I remembered how she once looked at me and said coldly, "You are just a guest here." All those small wounds suddenly fused into one giant scar. My own father was choosing greed over blood, betrayal over love. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them back. Crying would only weaken me. I had to stay still, had to think. At that moment, I realized something vital: silence could be my weapon. They believed I was naive, powerless, too weak to fight. That illusion would protect me until I was ready to strike. I gripped my mother's pendant so hard, the edges cut into my palm. It hurt, but the pain anchored me. My father wanted me gone, erased, forgotten. But if he thought I would surrender the house, the legacy, the last piece of my mother, he was wrong. Very wrong. Before I tell you how my father's own keys betrayed him, I need to pause and speak directly to you. If you have ever felt unwanted in your own family, if you have ever been treated as though you were disposable, then you already understand the weight of that moment. I was not just fighting for bricks or for money. I was fighting for the only promise my mother had left me and for the right to exist without fear in my own home. So let me ask you, where are you listening from right now? Maybe you are in a quiet kitchen, maybe in your car on the way to work, maybe lying awake at night replaying words someone you trusted once said to you. Share your city, share your story in the comments. I read them and I know thousands of others do too. We are not alone in betrayal, and the act of speaking out turns isolation into community. And if you believe that family should be measured by actions and love not by greed and blood alone, then subscribe. Every story I share carries that truth, and what happened after that night proved it more than anything else in my life. My name is Lydia. I am 28 years old, and until that night, I still believed somewhere deep inside that my father might change. I teach second grade at a small public school in our town, and every afternoon I come home to the same two-story house where I grew up, the same house my mother filled with laughter and music before she was gone. My students see me as patient and gentle, but what they do not see is that when I close the classroom door and walk into this house, I am stepping into a battlefield disguised as home. When I was 17, my mother Clara died of a sudden illness. The memory of that day is carved into me like a scar. I can still hear the sound of the rain hitting the church roof during her funeral, can still feel the damp cold in my bones as I clutched the folded program with her photograph. My father Robert held the coffin, his face tight and unreadable. I cried until my throat ached, but he never reached for my hand. That was the moment something shifted in him. He buried my mother, but he also buried whatever tenderness he had once shown me. Months later, Elaine entered our lives. She was polished, confident, and much younger than my father. She walked into the house as though she already owned it, rearranging furniture, moving my mother's photographs into drawers, filling the shelves with porcelain figurines. She claimed my mother's seat at the dinner table, slipping into it with a smile that never reached her eyes. I remember the first time she looked straight at me and said, "You are just a guest here." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but the way she tilted her head and the sharpness in her gaze told me it was no joke at all. From that day, life in the house shifted. The kitchen where my mother used to hum while cooking became Elaine's stage. The piano my mother played collected dust in the corner because Elaine complained it was too loud. The roses my mother planted out front withered because no one watered them. And Robert, he let it all happen. He seemed to retreat further into himself, pouring whiskey into glasses each night, while Elaine whispered in his ear. When I graduated high school and later college, I thought of leaving, thought of building a life far away. But every time I stepped toward that decision, I thought of my mother's words before she died. "This house is yours, Lydia. It will always be yours." She had said it with her hand warm around mine, her eyes fierce even as her body weakened. It was not just a house to me. It was a promise, a sanctuary, a piece of her that still breathed. Leaving it behind felt like abandoning her all over again. So I stayed. I worked hard at school, grading papers late into the night at the dining room table, ignoring the way Elaine would sigh dramatically when she saw my books spread out. I cooked simple dinners for myself because she never included me in her elaborate meals with my father. I kept my mother's pendant close hidden under my blouse, and sometimes in the quiet hours of dawn, I would touch the piano keys just to remind myself that this was still my home. The years piled up, each one marked by small humiliations, birthdays ignored, holidays where I was excluded from family photographs. The constant reminder from Elaine that I did not belong. Yet I endured it all because I believed my father might one day remember I was his daughter, that blood might mean something after all. I kept silent, thinking my patience would be rewarded, but the silence only made them bolder. The cracks widened when Robert began to speak of retirement. He and Elaine planned trips, browsed glossy magazines with pictures of Florida condos and European cruises. I noticed how their eyes would linger on the walls of the house, how they spoke about money as if it were already in their hands. Elaine once let it slip in front of me, laughing softly. "Imagine what this place will fetch when it's ours." She caught my gaze, unflinching, daring me to challenge her. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said nothing, but the words etched themselves into me. I tried to fill the void with my work. My students were the light in my days. When they handed me drawings with hearts and stick figures labeled Miss Lydia, I felt a piece of what family should feel like. Sometimes Naomi, another teacher at the school, would invite me out for coffee, and she would say things like, "You deserve better than the way they treat you." I smiled, brushed it off, but inside I knew she was right. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the night I heard the truth spoken aloud. Until that moment, I could convince myself that Elaine's cruelty was just pettiness, that Robert's silence was weakness, not malice. I clung to the idea that beneath it all, he would never cross the line into real betrayal. But when I heard his voice whisper calm and deliberate that I would not be around much longer, everything shattered. It was not just abandonment, it was conspiracy. As I sat alone in my room that night, the memories flooded me, my mother's laughter, the promise she had made, the endless humiliations I had endured. I realized that what I faced was not a family. Blood meant nothing if love was absent. Actions spoke louder than any tie of DNA. My father had chosen greed over me. Elaine had chosen cruelty over compassion. They had shown me who they truly were. And though my hands trembled, though fear curled in my stomach, a spark lit inside me. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, telling me the house was mine, telling me I was stronger than I believed. That spark would become fire. I did not know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain: they wanted me gone. but I would not disappear quietly. The next morning, the house felt like a stage where every movement could reveal a hidden trap. I could not look at Robert without hearing his voice from the night before, calm and casual, predicting my absence. I could not look at Elaine without seeing her smile sharpen into a blade. At breakfast, she placed a cup of coffee in front of me with a little too much insistence. I stared at the dark surface, imagining powders dissolving where I could not see. My stomach twisted. I pushed the cup aside and muttered, "I am running late for school." She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. When I left for work, their voices floated behind me, muffled but urgent. I heard Robert say, "She will not last the summer." Elaine replied, "Good, the realtor is waiting." I walked faster, heart hammering, afraid they would notice I was listening again. That phrase, "she will not last the summer," lodged in my chest like a thorn. This was no longer just idle cruelty. They were marking a timeline. At school, I tried to focus on my students, their small voices reading aloud, their laughter filling the classroom. But each time the phone rang, each time someone knocked on the door, I jolted as though death itself had come for me. I graded papers mechanically, the words blurring on the page. In the staff lounge, Naomi touched my arm. "You look pale. Is everything all right?" My lips parted to tell her everything, but fear sealed them shut. If I spoke the truth aloud, it would make the danger real. That evening, I returned home to find Robert on the phone, his voice stern but excited. "Yes, 750 minimum. We can move quickly once she is out." My chest constricted. He spoke as if my life were nothing but a number, a figure on a contract. Elaine walked by me with a glass of wine, her eyes lingering on me for a second too long. It was not a glance of care, it was calculation. I knew then that their betrayal was not only emotional, it was financial, deliberate, a scheme polished and ready. Later, in the quiet of my room, I opened the old cedar chest my mother had left me. Inside were her letters, photographs, and the pendant I already wore. Beneath them, folded neatly, was a copy of a trust document I had never read carefully. My mother's handwriting covered the margin, "Protect Lydia." My hands trembled as I touched the paper. I had brushed past it for years, thinking it was just another piece of her meticulous planning. But now, under the weight of what I had overheard, I understood it could be my shield. Through the thin walls, I heard Robert say again, "She is weak. She cannot fight us." Elaine's laughter followed, cold and certain. I closed the chest and pressed my forehead against it, whispering to the memory of my mother. "They think I am weak. They think I will vanish. But you knew. You left me something, didn't you?" In that moment, the trigger was complete. I was no longer imagining slights or exaggerating cruelty. I had evidence, words spoken clearly, plans laid openly. My father and his wife wanted me gone and the house sold. The betrayal was not hidden in shadows anymore. It was laid out like a map of my destruction. And though fear coursed through me, another feeling began to rise, steady and sharp. I would not run. I would not vanish. I would not be erased. The first sign came quietly, so subtle I might have missed it if I had not been listening for every danger. I noticed Elaine's notebook left open on the kitchen counter, her neat cursive listing groceries. Milk, bread, wine, and one word that sent a chill crawling up my spine: pills. No dosage, no brand, just pills written twice underlined. When she entered the kitchen and saw me standing nearby, she snapped the notebook shut with a sharp smile, too fast, too defensive. "Making a list for vitamins," she said. Her tone was casual, but her eyes glinted with something darker. I nodded, pretending not to notice, but inside, every nerve screamed. 2 nights later, the plan grew bolder. At dinner, Elaine poured red wine into my glass herself, swirling it so that tiny bubbles clung to the surface. She watched as I lifted the glass, her gaze steady, her smile small and deliberate. Robert cleared his throat, his voice harsher than usual. "Drink. Don't be ungrateful." The command was heavy, not a suggestion. My throat tightened. I lifted the glass, pretending to sip. The bitter edge of the wine touched my lips, but I did not swallow. Instead, I coughed lightly, setting the glass down. "Too strong," I murmured. Elaine's lips curved in disappointment before she masked it with a laugh. When they left the room, I carried the glass with trembling hands to the window where my mother's roses once bloomed. The roses were gone now, but a potted fern sat by the sill. I tilted the glass, letting the dark liquid seep into the soil. The smell of the wine lingered sharp and acidic. Hours later, when I returned, the leaves of the fern drooped as though scorched. My chest constricted. It was no longer suspicion. It was proof. Quietly, I slipped into the garage, pulled a box of freezer bags from the shelf, and sealed the glass inside one. The bag crinkled as I pressed it closed, my heart hammering so loudly I thought they might hear me. I placed the bag in the bottom drawer of my desk beneath stacks of lesson plans. My fingers shook, but my resolve did not. I whispered to myself, "This is evidence. Stay silent. Stay steady. The next morning, Elaine was unusually cheerful, humming as she stirred sugar into her own coffee. Robert watched me closely, his eyes narrowing when I only drank water. "You look pale," he said, voice laced with false concern. "Maybe you should rest more. Accidents happen when you're tired." The words dripped with menace disguised as fatherly advice. My stomach nodded, but I forced a small smile. "I'll be careful." That evening, Naomi noticed the tension in my face. We were grading spelling tests side by side when she leaned closer. "You've lost weight. What's going on at home?" My lips parted, then closed again. I wanted to tell her everything, but fear pressed against my ribs. If I spoke too soon, if Robert or Elaine discovered, they might strike faster. Instead, I whispered, "I just need time." She studied me, worry etched in her brow, but she nodded. Back in my room, I opened the cedar chest again. I laid the glass in front of the trust document I had found. My mother's handwriting glowed faintly in the lamplight. "Protect Lydia." It was as though she had known they would one day come for me. I touched the words with trembling fingers and felt strength rise where fear had lived. I realized then the power of silence, every quiet act saving the glass, keeping my face calm. Storing their words in my memory was a weapon sharper than shouting. They thought I was weak. They thought I was easy to erase. But I was building a case brick by brick like a fortress of truth. Late at night, as the house slept, I stood by the piano. I pressed one key, then another, soft notes echoing through the empty rooms. My mother used to play this same tune when storms rattled the windows, reminding me that fear could be drowned by music. Now it reminded me that survival did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered. By the time I returned to bed, the path was clear. My father and Elaine had crossed into murder, but I would not meet them with panic. I would meet them with patience, with proof, with the quiet strength they never expected from me. They wanted me gone, but I was preparing to make sure they would be the ones erased. The cedar chest had always been my mother's treasure box. As a child, I thought of it as a secret vault of memories, a place where her letters and family photos rested in quiet dignity. But after discovering the poisoned wine glass and Elaine's notebook, I saw it differently. It was no longer just a box of memories. It was a fortress, and I needed to know what weapons it held for me. I knelt on the floor and lifted out the bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon. Beneath them lay the trust document I had glimpsed before. My hands trembled as I unfolded the stiff paper. The ink was neat, deliberate. In the event of my passing, it read, "The property located at 214 Maple Lane shall belong solely to my daughter Lydia, with full rights and protections under this trust." My breath caught. I read it again, slower this time, letting each word settle inside me. It was airtight. The house was mine, not my father's, not Elaine's. Mine. In the margin, written in my mother's familiar script, was a single line, "Protect Lydia." My vision blurred. It felt as though she were reaching through time to steady me, to tell me she had foreseen this moment. She had known Robert's weakness. She had known greed could corrupt him, and she had built a shield for me long before I realized I would need it. I folded the document carefully and placed it in a folder, but I knew a piece of paper alone would not be enough. Robert and Elaine would fight with lies, with intimidation. I needed someone who could make this document sing in a courtroom, someone who could turn it from paper into iron. The next afternoon after school, I walked to the small law office 2 streets over. The brass plate on the door read, "Grace Whitmore, Attorney at Law, Retired." Grace had represented my mother years ago. I remembered her face at the funeral, stern but kind, offering condolences while clutching a leather briefcase. She was older now, hair silver and tied back neatly, but her eyes carried the same sharpness. She looked up from her desk as I entered. "Lydia," she said softly, as though she had been waiting for me all these years. "You've grown into your mother's image. I placed the folder on her desk with shaking hands. Inside was the trust document and carefully sealed the bag with the wine glass, her brows furrowed as she examined each item. "Tell me everything," she urged. The words poured out. I told her about the whispers in the living room, about the pills scribbled in Elaine's notebook, about the forced glass of wine and the fern that withered overnight. I told her how Robert spoke of me as if I were a temporary inconvenience, an obstacle in a financial plan. Grace listened without interrupting her pen scratching notes. When I finished, the silence hung heavy. Finally, she said, "Your mother was wise. She left you more than a home. She left you legal ground as solid as stone. This trust is clear. The house belongs to you, and no court will dispute it. As for this," she lifted the bagged wine glass carefully, "this is evidence of something criminal. You must keep it safe. Do not confront them yet. Let their arrogance become your proof." Her calmness steadied me. "But how do I survive in the meantime?" I asked. Grace leaned back, studying me. "You survive the way your mother taught you, quietly, patiently. You act as though you know nothing. That is your armor. And when the moment comes, you strike with law, not rage." I exhaled slowly, feeling both fear and relief. Grace agreed to make certified copies of the trust and store one in her office safe. She gave me her direct line and said, "If anything happens, call me, day or night." On the way back home, my phone buzzed. A message from Naomi Coffey tonight. "You seem so tense." For a moment, I hesitated. But then I realized I needed more than legal backing. I needed someone who could stand beside me in the day-to-day, someone who believed me when fear clawed at my throat. At the cafe, the smell of roasted beans wrapped around us as we sat in the corner booth. Naomi studied me with the eyes of a friend who had waited long enough for the truth. "Tell me," she said. I broke. I told her everything I had told Grace, but with the raw fear I had tried to hide. The whispers, the wine, the look in Elaine's eyes. Naomi reached across the table and held my hand. "Lydia, this is more than betrayal. This is attempted murder." Tears blurred my vision. "Who would believe me?" "I do," she said firmly. "And I'll help you. We'll set up cameras. We'll keep records. You will not fight this alone." Her certainty anchored me. That night, Naomi came to the house with 2 small security cameras. Together, we placed one in the hallway near the living room and another near the kitchen. I felt a strange calm settle over me as we tested them, watching the blinking red lights. It was not just paranoia anymore. It was preparation. As Naomi left, she hugged me tightly. "They think you're weak. Let them think it. But you're stronger than they'll ever know." I stood in the doorway watching her car pull away, and for the first time in weeks, I felt less like prey. Between my mother's trust, Grace's guidance, and Naomi's loyalty, I was no longer alone. My allies were quiet, but they were powerful, and together we were building something Robert and Elaine could never steal. In my room, I opened the folder one last time. The trust document lay there like a shield, and beside it, the poisoned glass glimmered under lamplight. 2 artifacts, one of love, one of malice. Both would decide the war to come. In the weeks that followed, life in the house became a performance, a split screen of deception. On one side of the screen, Robert and Elaine planning a future that revolved around cashing in on my supposed absence. On the other, me moving quietly, building a fortress of evidence and resolve. Robert and Elaine spoke more openly now, believing my silence meant ignorance. In the mornings, I overheard them at the dining table with glossy brochures, spread out condos by the beach vacation villas with infinity pools. Elaine circled photos with a gold pen, her laughter echoing. "We'll host dinner parties every weekend," she said. Robert nodded, his eyes shining in a way I had not seen since before my mother died. Only now the shine was greed, not joy. Sometimes they spoke about me as though I had already vanished. "Once she's out, the realtor can list it within a week," Elaine said one afternoon. "We'll get top dollar. This market is perfect." Robert sipped his whiskey, murmuring, "She won't last long enough to cause problems." Their voices blended with the clink of ice in his glass, a chilling soundtrack to their betrayal. Meanwhile, I perfected my quiet counterattack. Grace had filed the trust document in her safe with certified copies stored off-site. Naomi had shown me how to check the small cameras we had hidden, and every night I reviewed the footage. I watched Elaine slip powders into cups, Robert counting stacks of documents, both of them whispering late into the night. My stomach twisted, but I also felt stronger. They were writing their own indictment, and I was recording every word. I began keeping a journal noting dates and times. June 4th, 8:15 a.m. Elaine places pills into wine glass, later discards it. June 7th, 9:40 p.m. Robert on phone mentions 750,000 minimum offer. I wrote each entry in neat lines, just as I asked my students to do. My handwriting felt like a weapon carving truth into permanence. At school, I wore the mask of normalcy. I graded papers, led spelling bees clapped as my students recited poems. But every now and then, my voice caught my thoughts drifting back to the house, to the danger waiting there. Naomi noticed. "You're holding it together," she whispered once in the staff lounge. "But you don't have to hold it alone." Her support became a lifeline. Robert, too, noticed something, though not what he thought. One evening, he cornered me in the hallway, his breath heavy with liquor. "You're awfully quiet these days," he said, eyes narrowing. "Quiet can be dangerous." He leaned in closer. "Don't do anything stupid, Lydia. You wouldn't want accidents." I met his gaze, forcing my voice steady. "I'll be careful." Then I walked past him, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Quiet but powerful, just as Grace had said. Parallel lives continued. Elaine ordered expensive clothes, online boxes arriving at the door as though she were already living in the mansion she imagined. I, on the other hand, spent evenings with Naomi, installing a lockbox beneath my bed where I stored the journal backup copies of The Trust and the sealed wine glass. "If anything happens to me," I told Naomi, "take this to Grace immediately." She squeezed my hand and promised she would. Then came the neighborhood barbecue, an event Elaine insisted on hosting. She wanted to display herself as queen of the house, parading around with trays of hors d'oeuvres, showing off the backyard as though it were already hers. Neighbors gathered, sipping drinks, chatting by the grill. I stayed in the corner, silent, watching. At one point, I heard Elaine laughing with a neighbor. "We're planning to sell soon, maybe move closer to the beach. This house has served its purpose." The words sliced through me. She said them as though I were invisible, as though I were not standing 10 feet away. I caught the neighbor's startled glance at me, and for the first time, I felt the humiliation begin to turn. People were noticing. The performance was cracking. Later that night, Naomi helped me retrieve the camera footage from that day. On screen, Elaine's face lit up with false charm as she boasted about the sale. Robert's nod confirmed it. We saved the clip, labeling it carefully. Piece by piece, their empire of lies was becoming a cage. But the danger grew sharper, too. One evening, I returned from school to find the gas stove left on flames unlit. The kitchen reeked of gas, heavy and suffocating. My hands shook as I twisted the knobs shut, my lungs burning. When I turned, Elaine stood in the doorway, her smile too wide. "Careless of you," she said. "Imagine if something had sparked." Her tone was light, but her eyes glittered. That night, I wrote in my journal, June 15th, 6:30 p.m., "Gas stove deliberately left on." Elaine in doorway. My pen dug into the paper so hard it nearly tore. Quiet but powerful. Every entry was a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. Despite the fear, I felt a strange sense of control. They thought they were building a future on my absence, but I was building a case on their presence. Every laugh, every slip, every careless act was another stone in the wall of truth around me. By the end of June, the split screen was complete. On one side, Robert and Elaine dreamed of luxury, their greed swelling with every plan. On the other, I stood rooted in my mother's trust, fortified by Grace's legal expertise and Naomi's loyalty. The collision was inevitable. I could feel it coming like thunder in the distance. At night, I lay in bed and whispered to the memory of my mother. "You gave me the blueprint. You gave me allies. They will not win." And though fear still lingered in the corners of my room, determination filled the rest. The stage was set. Their arrogance had reached its peak, and soon the humiliation they had planned for me would boomerang back onto them sharper than they could ever imagine. The morning it happened began like any other sunlight pouring through the blinds, the faint hum of traffic outside, the clatter of Elaine's heels on the hardwood floors. But there was an edge to the air, a current of anticipation I could almost taste. Something inside me whispered, "Today is the day." Robert's voice boomed from the living room as I packed my school bag. "The realtor's coming at noon. Make sure you're ready." His tone was triumphant, like a man about to receive a crown. Elaine chimed in. Finally, no more clutter, no more whining. Just clean walls ready for staging. They spoke as if I were not even in the house, as if I had already vanished. I left for work quietly, but my heart raced all day. I could barely hear my students recite multiplication tables. I kept picturing Robert jangling his keys, Elaine showing off her house, the realtor nodding in approval. I imagined their faces when the truth cut through their fantasy. By 11:45, for 5 a.m., my phone buzzed. Naomi, I'm outside your house. Want me to record? I typed back quickly. Yes, stay hidden. I had already switched the locks 2 nights earlier with the help of a locksmith Grace recommended. Stronger locks, new keys, reinforced strike plates. The paperwork had been filed, the trust registered my ownership, legally stamped. I was not trespassing in their house. They were trespassing in mine. At noon, sharp Naomi's camera captured the scene. Robert, in his pressed suit, strode up the walkway with Elaine on his arm. Her lipstick was too bright, her smile too wide, as though she were stepping into a magazine shoot. Behind them, the realtor, a slim man in a gray jacket, carried a folder. Robert pulled out his key ring, confident, smug. He inserted the key into the lock and twisted. Nothing. He frowned, tried again. Still nothing. His jaw tightened. Elaine leaned in. You're doing it wrong, she hissed. She grabbed the key, shoved it in, twisted hard. The lock held firm. Why isn't it working? She demanded, her voice rising. Robert's face flushed red. He rattled the knob, yanked the handle, pounded the door with his fist. Open, damn it! The realtor shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Naomi's camera without realizing he was being filmed. Finally, Robert shouted, Lydia, open this door right now! His voice cracked fury, replacing composure. I stepped out from the side path, my backpack still slung over one shoulder, my expression calm. This is my house, I said evenly. You don't live here anymore. The realtor blinked, confused. Wait, what's going on? I held up a folder. The deed, the trust, certified by the county clerk. This property belongs solely to me. Elaine's face drained of color. That's impossible. Robert, tell her. Robert lunged toward me, but Naomi stepped forward, phone raised high. Careful, she warned. You're on camera. The neighbors had begun to gather. Curtains twitched, doors cracked open. Mr. Dawson, from across the street, crossed his arms, watching with narrowed eyes. A couple walking their dog slowed to a stop. The audience was forming, just as fate intended. Robert pounded the door again, bellowing, This is my house! I built it with my own hands! I looked at him, my voice low but clear. No. You abandoned it the day you abandoned Mom's memory. She protected me from this moment. And now the house protects me from you. Elaine's composure shattered. She grabbed Robert's arm, hissing, She can't do this! We promised the realtor! The realtor cleared his throat, his professionalism straining. Legally, if she has the trust. He gestured weakly toward my folder. His eyes darted between us, already calculating how quickly he could escape this disaster. Robert's face twisted. He shouted so loudly the words echoed down the street. You're nothing but a parasite. I should have gotten rid of you years ago. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Mr. Dawson shook his head, muttering, shameful. The couple with the dog pulled it closer, whispering. Elaine tried to drag Robert back, but he wrenched free, veins bulging in his neck. You think you've won, he snarled. We'll find a way. You can't hide behind paper forever. I met his fury with silence. I simply slipped the new key into the lock, turned it smoothly, and opened the door just enough to step inside. Before closing it, I looked out at the crowd, then back at him. I don't need to hide, I said quietly. You've already destroyed yourselves. And then I shut the door. The sound echoed like a gavel. Inside, my legs trembled, but my chest felt lighter. Through the curtains, I saw Robert shouting, Elaine flailing, the realtor backing away, Naomi filming steadily, neighbors murmuring. The humiliation was complete. For years, they had spoken over me, erased me, planned my disappearance. But now, in broad daylight, before witnesses, their power had crumbled. They were locked out not just of the house, but of the narrative they had written for themselves. When Naomi joined me inside, she hugged me fiercely. That was perfect, she whispered. You didn't need to scream. You just needed to stand. I sank into the couch, exhaustion flooding me. Outside, Robert's shouting faded into silence as neighbors pulled out phones filming, documenting. I knew the story would ripple through the neighborhood, whispered over fences carried into kitchens. The mighty Robert and Elaine exposed and powerless. For once, I did not feel afraid. I felt seen, and that was the deepest humiliation for them, that the girl they had called weak, a burden invisible, had defeated them with calm, with paper, with truth. The humiliation on the front lawn should have been enough to silence them. For most people, it would have been. But Robert and Elaine were not most people. Pride mixed with desperation is a dangerous poison. I knew they wouldn't walk away quietly. 2 nights later, I heard their voices through the living room window. They had come back under cover of darkness, thinking they could force their way in. Robert's tone was low and guttural, Elaine's sharp and frantic. "We can't let her win," she hissed. "The neighbors already think we're fools." I had already expected this. Grace had urged me to keep a recorder ready and to alert the police if they returned. I stood inside the house, my phone in one hand, Naomi's small camera blinking from the corner shelf. When Robert's fist slammed against the door again, I took a steady breath and opened it just enough to face them. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "Give me the keys, Lydia. Right now." "No," I said calmly. "This house is mine, legally, permanently, and you know it." Elaine stepped forward, her nails digging into Robert's arm as if to steady him. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us." I met her gaze, my voice cool. "You didn't raise me. Mom did. And she's the one who made sure you could never take this house." I held up the trust document, laminated, now sealed in a protective sleeve. The lamplight gleamed off the words like armor. Robert's face twisted. "Paper doesn't matter. Blood matters. I am your father." Something inside me hardened. Then, act like it. Fathers protect. Fathers don't poison wine glasses and leave gas stoves burning. His jaw dropped, and for the first time he faltered. Elaine's eyes widened in panic. "You can't prove that she snapped." I gestured toward this camera in the corner. "I already did. Every word, every action, every attempt, it's all recorded. Grace has copies, and the police will have them soon." At that moment, flashing lights filled the street. Naomi, waiting across the road, had already called the authorities when Robert and Elaine showed up. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car, their radios crackling. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered once more. It was the same audience as before, but this time the stage lights were brighter. "Is there a problem here?" one officer asked, approaching. Robert puffed out his chest. "This is my house. She's locking me out illegally." I handed the officer the trust document. My voice did not shake. "This house belongs to me. My mother's trust is registered with the county clerk. He's trespassing, and I have evidence of attempted poisoning." The officer scanned the document, then looked at Robert. "Sir, this shows she is the legal owner. If you continue this behavior, you'll be facing charges." Elaine's face went pale. Robert's bravado crumbled, but he still tried one last time. He lunged toward me, his hand reaching for the paper. But before he could touch it, Naomi stepped forward with her phone raised. "Careful," she said again, her voice steady. "You're being filmed. Everyone can see you." The officer caught Robert's arm, pulling him back. "That's enough," he barked. "You're leaving." In that moment, silence washed over me. The years of being invisible, dismissed, treated as an obstacle, they ended here. Not with screams, not with violence, but with truth laid bare and witnessed by all. I looked at Robert one last time. His shoulders slumped, his eyes darted to the ground. For a brief second, I saw the man who had once tucked me in at night, who had once laughed at my spelling bee trophies. But that man had been buried long ago, replaced by greed and cruelty. "You wanted to get rid of me," I said softly, almost to myself. "But you lost yourself instead." Elaine tugged at his sleeve, whispering furiously. The officers guided them away, their protests fading into the night. Neighbors dispersed slowly, their whispers rising into the air. When the patrol car pulled away, Naomi placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over," she murmured. I exhaled, my body trembling, but my spirit unbroken. "No," I whispered back. "It's just the beginning." For the first time in years, the house felt like mine, not just by law, but in truth. My mother's voice seemed to echo in the quiet "Protect Lydia." And I had. The house was silent after the patrol car disappeared down Maple Lane. Silent in a way it hadn't been in years. No footsteps clacking across the wood floors, no muttered insults bleeding through the walls, no whispers about selling a future that was never theirs. It was just me, the creak of the beams, and the faint tick of the hallway clock. For the first time, the silence felt like peace, not threat. Grace came by the next morning, her briefcase in hand. She spread out the paperwork on the dining table, the trust copies, the county filings, Naomi's footage stored on a flash drive. Her glasses perched low on her nose as she read every line with meticulous care. "They have no case left," she said at last, closing the folder with a firm snap. "And if they dare try again, we'll meet them in court armed with more than enough evidence." Relief flooded me, but not triumph. I thought I would feel victorious, vindicated. Instead, what I felt most was release, like chains falling off my shoulders one by one. "So it's really over?" I asked. Grace gave me a measured look. "The legal part, yes. But the emotional battle, that's yours to carry and yours to put down when you're ready." Her words stayed with me. Over the next weeks, I began the slow work of reclaiming not just the house, but myself. Naomi helped me repaint the living room walls, scrubbing away the lingering scent of Robert's whiskey and Elaine's perfume. We opened the windows wide, letting sunlight and fresh air sweep through. Every brushstroke felt like a small act of healing, a statement that this space belonged to life, not to greed. I also found myself lingering at the cedar chest again. Beneath the trust document lay my mother's old journals filled with recipes, poems, and notes she had written for me. One entry stopped me cold. "Lydia has a heart too big for this world. I pray she learns that boundaries are not walls, they are doors she gets to lock and unlock herself." That night, I sat at the piano bench, the same one my mother used to guide me through scales. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. It had been years since I dared to play. But when I pressed the first note, a soft C, it was as if her hand rested over mine. The melody that spilled out wasn't perfect, but it was real. Tears blurred my eyes, but they were cleansing, not bitter. Meanwhile, word spread through the neighborhood. Mr. Dawson waved when I checked the mail, saying, "Good for you standing up to them." A couple from down the street dropped off cookies, murmuring, "We saw everything. You were so strong." Their kindness stitched something inside me that betrayal had torn open. I knew then that justice wasn't just about paperwork or police cars. It was about restoring dignity, reclaiming a voice that had been silenced for too long. And it was about recognizing that family is not defined by who shares your blood, but by who chooses to stand with you when others would rather see you erased. With Grace's guidance, I took one final step. I sold a portion of the property, not the house itself, but the unused back lot, and used the proceeds to establish the Clara Whitmore Music Scholarship at the local community college. The announcement went out in the local paper Scholarship Honors Teacher and Mother's Legacy of Resilience. The photo accompanying it was of me at the piano smiling faintly, a stack of sheet music beside me. The day the first recipient was announced, I attended quietly, sitting in the back row of the auditorium. A young woman stepped onto the stage, tears shining in her eyes as she accepted the scholarship. "This will help me keep studying," she said. Her voice trembled, but her dream was steady. In that moment, I felt my mother's presence more vividly than ever. Her legacy was alive, not trapped in a house, but moving forward in the lives of others. As for Robert and Elaine, they disappeared from Maple Lane. I heard rumors they tried to buy a small condo on the other side of town, but with no funds and their reputation in tatters, the deal collapsed. Some neighbors whispered they had moved in with Elaine's sister. Others said they skipped town altogether. I didn't chase the truth. Their story was no longer mine to carry. What mattered was the boundary I had drawn. I no longer answered their calls. I no longer flinched at the memory of their voices. The house was mine, but more importantly, my life was mine. And as I sat on the porch one evening watching the sun dip behind the maples, I whispered the moral I had earned through fire and betrayal: family is not blood. Family is action, and no inheritance, no house, no trust is worth more than dignity. That truth was my inheritance. That truth was my freedom. And that's how I turned betrayal into dignity, silence into strength, and a house into more than just walls. It became the stage where truth finally won. But now I want to turn to you. Have you ever faced betrayal from the very people who were supposed to protect you? Have you ever had to draw a line to choose dignity over blood ties? If so, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. You'll be surprised how many people here have lived through the same storms and found the courage to stand tall. Tell me, too, where you're listening from. I've seen people from New York, Dallas, Los Angeles, even small towns I'd never heard of come together in this community. Every time you share your city, it reminds me that these stories don't just belong to me, they belong to all of us. And if you believe, like I do, that family is proven by love and loyalty, not by greed and betrayal, then subscribe. Every week I share stories that shine a light on that truth. Stay with us, because sometimes survival is just the beginning and justice is what we build next.